Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast, brought to you in partnership with FootJoy. So this weekend just gone marks the return of the legend that is Anthony Kim. Kim came onto the scene in 2006, where he came second in his debut PGA Tour performance at the Valero Texas Open, which he picked up on a sponsor's exemption. And he went on to win two events in the 2008 season, which led him to become somewhat of a celebrity and was talked about by many as a possible successor to Tiger Woods. But Kim picked up a series of injuries after 2010 and gradually faded away from PGA Tour life. And his whereabouts and his activities have been the topic of much speculation and mystery since, with rumours that an insurance payout of $20 million was paid on the basis that he could never play professional golf again. Well, that was until Liv managed to bring him back for the event last week at Jeddah, where he managed two 76s and a 74. So me and Bruce dragged friend of the pod, Paolo Uggetti, staff writer for ESPN, onto the podcast, who's been covering the story for them over the last couple of weeks, and thought it'd be the perfect complement for the episode. Anyway, enjoy. This. I've caught a decent amount of the live stuff over the weekend. You're covering the story at the moment, right, Paolo? So you're working with Mark.
Mark and I he's their kind of full-time golf, writer. I switch over to golf once college football is over. So now I'm basically on golf right now. I was at Riv, Pebble, and I'll go to Augusta and US Open for sure. So yeah, I watched. I stayed up a little bit for. Was it Friday night? For us, I guess it's Friday night. To watch some of the or Thursday night to watch some of the live stuff on YouTube with 12,000 other people. It was really weird. It's the whole thing is. I mean, I have my own personal opinions about it, but just as a competitive endeavor, it's just fascinating.
That's the grim end of golf journalism, because I'm guessing you're watching that at 1 a.m. in California to stay up and then watch 4 or 5 hours of live golf on YouTube. It's not all rainbows, is it, Paolo?
No, it really isn't. Yeah, you get to go to Augusta, but then you also get to stay up and watch, some live golf on YouTube. So it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we wanted to put this episode in, knowing you guys are covering it for ESPN. I thought you'd be a great kind of person to help join us and help probably put a bit of color on this. I mean, I'm 37. Bruce, I've got 10 years on you, haven't I?
9. I'm 28. Yeah.
28.
Okay.
But I mean, Bruce, what would your recollection of Anthony Kim be? It's probably better than mine, to be honest, because I don't know much
if I could
golf.
sum up Anthony Kim in the sort of 3 memories I have of him, because I watched a lot of golf when I was, sort of 13, 14. He was in his prime, 2008, 9, 10, I want to say. Maybe not so much 10, but certainly sort of 7, 8, 9 he was. And the 3 sort of abiding memories I have of Anthony Kim was just unbelievably ostentatious belt buckles with AK and the sort of diamond kind of print on it. He'd grip down it like, an 1.5 2 inches, which I think he's still doing. And he'd also just have some incredible fist bump celebrations when he went and lit up Augusta with like 11 birdies in one round. And he ironed out Sergio in the singles of the Ryder Cup at Valhalla in 2008. And yeah, just watching him go nuts. He was exciting. And it does seem like a long time ago now, because it really was when he was in his prime and playing well, and kind of, I want to say he broke into the top, 15 in the world or so, and was there for a bit, wasn't he, Paolo? But yeah, that would be my memory of Anthony Kim, and now he's back.
Yeah, his highest ranking was 6th, I believe, in like 2008. So he got
Really?
into the top 10. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was that 1 year where he had the 3 or two PGA Tour wins, or 3. He had 3 total, but the 1 year where he won Quail Hollow. That was kind of the year where he blew up.
So, Paolo, you're obviously researching deep on him. His rookie season was what, 06, 07, is that right?
06.
He came in second at Valero or something. That was his debut start, but he was already
Valero.
primed at that point to be like the next big thing. Was kind of that was.
Right. I mean, that's what's fascinating, I think, to me about him, right? Is he kind of, in some ways, he was a little bit before his time. Like he would have been almost perfect in this era, more so than when he first blew
Yeah.
up, right? But I think that was the time where, I mean, Tiger was still such a big force, but everything was kind of going crazy around Tiger. So there was already, which it feels like it's been like that for the last 20 years, right? The search for the next guy, the search for the next Tiger. And obviously you have this guy come in here who has a different vibe, wears Nike as well, right? Has this like really powerful swing. And so there was a lot of energy around him because of the way he played, like Bruce said, but also because of the way he carried himself. And because there was some sort of void, the void was starting, right? Of like, okay, who's going to be next? Who's the next generation? And he kind of fit the profile really well at that time.
Yeah. So it's almost, him coming along with everything that was AK, it created a brand that propelled him into that space almost, rather than, it wasn't like he'd gone and notched up 15 major titles at that age by then. It was like it was almost like the media had created him in some ways, because it was like we need the guy that's going to take over. Because Woods in 07, 08, we're starting to see some. 07's a big year for Woods, I think, actually, isn't it? But we
and then he comes back
injuries.
08. Right. The injuries. He comes back in 08 and wins the US Open at Torrey Pines with the broken leg or all that. So you were starting to get a little bit of seeing the cracks in Tiger, I guess. He wasn't so much the powerful world beater at that point. He was still winning, right? But he had kind of lost a little bit of that real dominant fire that he had in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I guess he was playing a slightly diminished schedule as well by that point, wasn't he, Paolo? And that Tiger was kind of, I guess he was maybe always a little bit limited in the number of events he played, but certainly when those injuries really started to bite, he was playing slightly fewer, focusing on the big ones. And I guess that kind of paved the way for the likes of Anthony Kim, who did have a pretty decorated amateur career, I think, as well, if I'm not mistaken. Like did he play Walker Cup and then
he did
had a fast start, as we just talked about briefly there, to his professional career. And I guess it's just natural, isn't it, for the media to start looking for the next big thing, the next Tiger Woods. I mean, Rory, what's interesting is McIlroy's probably almost a direct contemporary, a little bit younger than Kim in terms of when he actually broke onto the scene. I remember the first I'd heard of him was the Open at Carnoustie in 2007, and that was like, I guess, right as Kim was starting his sort of rise.
Yeah, you've seen pictures of them playing with each other, so I think they were kind of right around the same time. I think, to your point though, like American media loves they obsess over the next big thing, right? I mean, when I see it, I used to cover the NBA, and then for the longest time it was Michael Jordan, right? Who's going to be the next guy? And now it's who's the next LeBron, etc. Right? Like it just goes on and on and on. Like there's always that kind of insatiable desire to find whoever the next big thing is going to be. And so, once AK showed up on the scene, and then eventually Rory, right? People were very quick to kind of look at both of them, and obviously one had the more longevity kind of going for him. But yeah, there is that obsession, and I think he fit in perfectly with that. And he was also somebody who, like you said, because of the way he carried himself, he garnered more attention, right? It wasn't so much just about his game. It was about the way he was kind of bucking the conventional wisdom of what a golfer should look like, which Tiger had already done, right, to a certain extent, but AK was kind of doing it in a different way.
He was more brash, wasn't he? I think if you go back and look at some of the articles of the day, there's so much written about the fact that, was it the 07 season? He was like, yeah, barely practiced, just turned up to events, squeaked through, but actually probably had a pretty good year, I think. You look at it, was it Oklahoma University? I think at one point he was playing second team. So something had obviously gone on there. There's loads of stories about him basically staying out partying. I think he's always had a reputation for that, which will no doubt, I don't know how much of that we can glean from what's happened in the kind of 10 or 12 year gap that we've had since. But does all of that play into this sort of like mythical reputation of Anthony, do you think?
Totally. I think the obsession is a combination of how high he got at a certain point in time, right, in his golf career, and then the way he was kind of carrying himself. But then at the same time, the mystery, right? I feel like nowadays with sports and with media, we know so much about these players. They're on social media. They're basically showing us almost everything they do to a certain extent. And so the fact that he kind of just disappeared, it almost made for like the perfect story, right? It made for this kind of it allowed for this mythical legend to begin to build and grow of like, where is he? What is he doing? I mean, Alan Shipnuck has chronicled his career or kind of that absence really well in multiple stories. And it's like you read it and there's rumors around 2008 and rumors around 2013, and Mickelson expected him to show up at a certain course in La Quinta, and then he doesn't show up. So you just start to kind of, it almost becomes a legend bigger than itself at a certain point, right? And it becomes like, oh, did you hear, I saw Anthony Kim here, or, or he might be coming back, but then it never materialized, which almost enhanced the whole story even more, right? And so I think that it's very rare nowadays in sports where you get something like that. So the fact that that existed, I think that's what made it so big in people's minds of, one day, Anthony Kim will come back. And then with the proliferation of social media, you just start getting people posting, remember Anthony Kim, right? Remember when he did this, remember when he did that. I know with the rumors that have started up recently before he fully returned, so many people were going back and watching that Sergio match, right? Of the Ryder Cup. And even I did, right? And I remembered it, but I like went back and watched it fully again. It's kind of creates that nostalgia, right? While also still building on the anticipation.
Yeah. And I can vividly remember, I want to say it's like maybe 2014 or 2016. There were like videos that popped up of Anthony Kim on a driving range, like in a hoodie and shorts, with slightly longer hair, but you could definitely tell that it was him. The swing was like the exact same. And people were like, oh, wow, is this it? Is this the comeback? Like, is this actually happening now? And I guess that just like, plays into it, doesn't it? The fact that you had someone who was so, had such a swashbuckling demeanor, but could also back it up. Like, he wasn't just a total flash in the pan, never really did anything. Like, he won 3-4 times on the PGA Tour, obviously had a couple of real close finishes in majors. I think he shot like one of the lowest rounds at Oakmont when it was playing crazily hard that year in 2007 when Cabrera won. Like, he shot a 67 or something in the final day when no one was really able to get close to par. And then all of a sudden, this guy seems to be in the prime of his years, age 28, just disappears. It's natural that when you see these videos pop up a few years down the line and the rumors going around, that it just adds to the mystique, doesn't it? When did they first, Paolo, when they kind of first sort of, the rumors started emerging that he might make a comeback?
This year you're talking about? The most recent rumors? Yeah,
just like, I don't know, maybe that time frame. Maybe we go back to it, because I'm right in thinking that he stopped playing in 2012. That was like his last sanctioned proper PGA Tour event.
Was that the Wells Fargo?
Yeah, that sounds. Yeah, and then that's when the injuries started kind of popping up. I think he had a thumb injury at one point, and then he tore his Achilles in San Diego while running, and that's where kind of he just disappeared. I mean, that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't some, he didn't go out on top, right? He kind of went out very inconspicuously and very, quietly, and that's what kind of eventually set off all the, that gap of information and of everything else. So yeah.
What were the last few years of his previous playing career like? So 08's an absolute stellar year, really. He's sort of, he's got his act together. He's sort of, I guess, kind of more focused than his rookie year. Things are looking up. When does it start to sort of tail off? Is it about 2010? Is it that when, these sort of little injuries are popping in and all of a sudden it's just sort of, does it sort of fizzle out? Is that kind of what happens, really?
Yeah, and I think that almost kind of adds to the legend even more, right? The fact that it was such a short period of time. Like, he was so quickly on scene, so quickly big, and then so quickly gone, right? I think if he would have had a more prolonged career with maybe more sporadic success, if you will, like maybe the fervor for his comeback and for his legend wouldn't have been as strong, but the fact that I think you're right, 2010 is when he first started having injuries. He failed to qualify for the Ryder Cup, which he had, been part of before. So that's when things started to go downhill around 2010 with the injuries, and he never really got back to that full, like late 2000s that really got him on scene. Because I mean, those years were crazy, right? I mean, obviously the Sergio Garcia match is maybe the big highlight, but the Augusta round of 65, with 11 birdies is insane. The fact that somebody did that, like, just trying to imagine what that would have been like or was like right at the time is crazy.
Yeah.
And also the fact that it's only 65 with 11 birdies.
I know that's the real good point, right? It's a very chaotic scorecard, I'm sure.
But it's funny when you put it like that, it just shows how subjective our memories are. There's my kind of vision of him being like, whoa, this guy all of a sudden just vanished. He was beating Sergio Garcia and making 11 birdies at Augusta, but actually it started to dwindle. Like his form was kind of tapering off for a good 2-3 years after, those highlights early on in his career. To what extent do you think that those, sort of cynical question perhaps, but the injuries and the kind of lifestyle that he had of someone who maybe didn't practice loads and was kind of quite brash and confident, like how do you think that kind of just meshed together to be the perfect storm for him walking away? I mean, is there much that we really know about how that all played out?
I thought it was the insurance.
Yeah, I mean that's where. So that's kind of the long rumored, and I think it's been. I don't know if it's been fully confirmed in that sense, but I think that's kind of the reality of his situation, right? Where he took out insurance on his body for injury, and I believe the Shipnuck article from at the time had it, where it was. Some people were saying it's closer to like 20 million, basically, that he got tax free, essentially for never playing again. So once he's injured, right, and he's staring at this long road to come back, and it's either the insurance money, right, or what would he have needed to do on the PGA Tour to earn as much as the insurance money would have given him, right? And I think that's where like the calculus was. Right? He hasn't talked. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear him talk now about it and what his thinking was, but that seemed to be the calculus of this insurance money. If he takes it, he can't play. Like if he swings in one more time on the PGA Tour, the insurance money is void.
Yeah, and it must be hard because at the time in, I don't know, 2013 or whatever, you're probably thinking 20 million. Yeah, probably my peak years, I was clearing maybe 2 or 3. So you're like, well, 10 years, that makes sense. You look at it in 2016, 18, 19, you're like, shit, like if I was top of my game now, I'd be clearing 30, 40, 50 million US a year. But also it's time away from the game, and he's thinking, well, actually, I can't get back to that point. So I suppose, yeah, it must be a really tricky spot to go in. And I don't know how much I want to put into the sort of rumor mill on this, but I kind of get the sense that whenever he spoke publicly about it before, it was like golf wasn't his sole identity. Like he was just really good at it. That's kind of what I'm inferring. Like he wasn't desperate to hit golf balls every waking minute, and maybe some time away and a decent bank balance was probably enough for him for quite a while.
Yeah, and that's why, like, I feel like I'm not the only person who's made this point, but it's funny now that he's going to live, where like that's kind of the sentiment, right, for those guys, where they go there and maybe they don't care so much about winning at a high clip, but their bank account's fine and they're getting to play less golf, right? I mean, that's what's interesting about his comeback now. But yeah, I think there's a ton of rumors, obviously, about how he felt about golf. There's people in stories saying he loves golf. He's super competitive. Like he's wanting to play. Like he wishes he could play. And then there's people saying, he barely hit balls, or like the game's passed him by. He's just there watching. I think in the Shipnuck story, he talks about how a friend is just sitting him there watching him watch SportsCenter or Golf Channel, like just kind of watching literally the game pass him by. And hard to know without him actually putting words to it, but it is interesting when you look at his upbringing, right? He had very strict parents, parents who wanted him to succeed in golf. And, I think there's an anecdote in the Shipnuck story where it's, his parents, he won the tournament, but his dad, I think, threw away the trophies because the scores weren't low enough, and so there's that kind of like mentality too, right? Which, like, I mean, you never know how that affects the person, how that takes a toll on somebody in the long run. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating to kind of think about not just like what could have been, but like what was the decision making behind not coming back, and then what was the decision making behind coming back now, of all time, of all places. So yeah,
I mean, I'd be interested to get your guys' takes on this, because I, for one, felt that the video he posted on his newly created Instagram just prior to teeing off in Jeddah on Friday was actually quite a cool bit of content. Like it was a nice little mix, and I'm not someone who's really watched any live on YouTube. I just find it so clunky and so kind of like just uninspiring. Commentary I find it just doesn't hit the ear right, and it's just not that fun to watch. But I tuned in, like I tuned in on Friday morning.
Staying up at 2 a.m. to watch it, Bruce.
Yeah. And like, I think there's definitely been like a great bit of PR behind, him coming back. Obviously it's a great story, but the way they've executed it as well, obviously, to loop into your point there, Paolo, like he has said that he's going to kind of tell his story in time when he's ready. Hopefully he delivers on that, because it sounds like it would be a bloody interesting one.
You'd almost want him to write a book, right, or something. I mean, nowadays I feel like athletes aren't really doing that. They're kind of producing their own documentaries. That's kind of where things are headed now. But it would be fascinating to hear about his, what the last 10, 12 years have looked like for him. I mean, there's got to be some stories there about that. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that the little clip that they made, like the social media release of him coming back, was really cool. But then they also were like, the way they branded it was like, "Hello haters," right? And it's like, it's him, and it was just so weird, because it's like literally the entire golf world has like been wanting this guy to come back and play golf for the last 12 years, and nobody's hating on him. I mean, I guess maybe there are some people that are hating the fact that he went to live, but he was never going to come back on the PGA Tour. Like, that just didn't make sense for him for multiple reasons. So, it's pretty fascinating to see what the rollout has looked like in terms of his comeback and all that.
Yeah, I think I suppose live is the perfect product for him to go back into, isn't it? Because there's all the hype. Like, I watched it all day Friday. There's no way on earth I would have watched that event otherwise. And it's a pretty forgettable performance. Well, I suppose maybe unforgettable in some ways. Like, his game is so clearly so far away from where it should be. I suppose if on the PGA Tour you can't just keep taking sponsors exemptions and kind of sneaking in the back door into fields, and it probably wouldn't be the same. The fact that there's a cut means that you kind of watch AK shoot 76 a couple of times, and then you have to find a different story Saturday and Sunday. Whereas with a live event, it's kind of like you can double down on it for 3 days. But I don't know. I mean, he's not aligned to any team within live at the moment. These are sort of wild card picks into a field. How long do they give him on this? And at what point, I suppose, question is, I don't know what both of you think here, but could it be a sort of like we've hit the height of that story? And if his game doesn't really get into anything like competitive, like, it will fizzle out, won't it? In some ways, it's almost the myth is better than the reality. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I think you kind of get it.
I agree.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, those were my thoughts when I first started hearing about him potentially coming back and all those rumors. It was kind of like, oh yeah, it would be cool to see him again. It would be cool to see him swing a golf club again. But it also is pretty cool, the fact that he can just kind of disappear from public, from the world, from the golf world, and then everybody just talks about you and remembers the good times, remembers like the legend, right, of those Ryder Cup matches and that Augusta round. And there was almost no upside to him coming back unless, right, he just really wants to play golf, which then, at that point, it's like, it's good that he's getting multiple rounds. And it's good that he's playing live, because like you said, there's no cut. They're letting him just go out there and work out his struggles in Jeddah, I guess.
Yeah. You don't want to sort of, I don't know, overplay it, but there's an element of kind of ruining the myth, ruining the legend. What would everyone remember Anthony Kim by? Might have been a similar sentence to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, pre-Jeddah. It was like, swashbuckling, crazy belt buckles, like great flair, would just go on a run and make a load of birdies. And you wind it forward to today with, sort of the recent memory of his performance in live. It's like, what do you remember Anthony Kim by? He hit a massive socket, on the third hole of his round on Friday, just crazy shank. And then, topped a couple of shots as well and got round in a rusty 76. Like, that's a bit of a shame, because we need to remember him better than that. But, there's obviously a lot more ahead of us, it seems. And hopefully the story is that he'll go on and become somewhat competitive. But 10, 12 years out from the game, I don't know, like, you've obviously covered the sport in a lot of detail, Paolo. Like, it just seems like that's a lot of time to make up, no matter how good you were.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it, right? I think that's where best case scenario for him in some ways. Like, sure, to your point, if he were to kind of keep on with this and somehow make some, finish top 10 in a live event,
Yeah.
look like he's back, right? I don't even know what that would look like, but let's just say that happens. That's of course best case scenario. But in some ways, I feel like he's going to do this for a little bit. It's going to be unforgettable or forgettable, and then we're going to totally forget about it in 10 years from now, and we're still going to remember the previous version of him and just act like this didn't happen.
This didn't happen.
I think there's some of that. Yeah, no, I feel like that's potentially where things are going to go, right? I mean, and that's why I'm curious to hear from him. It's like, I mean, I'm sure Liv paid him a good amount of money to do this because for them, it's a great publicity play. But what was the real true incentive for him to actually think, okay, I'm going to get my game back in shape, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, because they've had their payoff, haven't they? Now, like, there's no point giving them giving AK a $200 million deal to be signed for the next 5 years to live events. Because like, if he shoots 76 for the next 5 years, like, people will wear themselves out on it. We will not be doing a podcast about Anthony Kim in 4 years when he continues to shoot 76. The best story in golf would be him winning an event on live at some point in the next, in the next 4 or 5 months. It just feels like that is completely unimaginable. But, like, if he could go and do that, then, I mean, he would silence absolutely everybody in the golfing world. That would be, I would say that would be as remarkable, if not more, than Woods' win in 2019. It would be that level, wouldn't it?
It would be up there for sure. Yeah, I think that would be crazy. I mean, there's one, winning live Adelaide versus winning Augusta and winning the Masters. A little different, but
maybe. But like,
Sam's just had his press credential for Augusta just cancelled there.
Yeah, that's gone now. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying with, I mean, look, I think I'm kind of saying with a dozen years out of the game, like, the distance he has got to catch up is absolutely monumental 100%. At that point. Like, if he could do it, it would be. I mean, I suppose the really strange thing watching the live broadcast this weekend is, like, I'd actually forgotten they've actually got quite a really good field of players live. The standard of the players.
Yeah.
It's not like it was at the beginning. You Centurion, and it's like, okay, DJ's playing and Poulter and there's a few other good guys. Now it's like, no, you actually have to beat like 15 really, really good golfers to win that. And that's why I agree with you, Sammy. It's an unbelievably tall order for him to win a live event. I don't even think I would agree with you and say it's the same level as Tiger winning at Augusta in 2019, but it's remarkable nonetheless.
It would be a pretty remarkable feat for sure. I mean, and to your point, I had that realization too this week. I'm like, top of the live leaderboards: Rahm, Neiman, Koepka, DeChambeau, Mickelson, right? And it's just like, and then I look at the top of the PGA Tour leaderboard this week, and it's not that good.
No, exactly.
It's kind of crazy how slowly they really gathered a pretty elite group of players.
It is such a strange product to watch, though, because the whole stuff with when you watch the broadcast on the PGA Tour, they are commentating on the golf and the players, and they're doing it somewhat objectively. When you watch live, they are doing everything they can. It's like you've got sort of a series of live cheerleaders just kind of trying to force feed you every bit of good news story that could come out of live. It is a very strange thing to watch, I find.
I actually think they maybe missed a slight trick in terms of doing this announcement with Kim now rather than when it was maybe competing with a bigger PGA Tour event. I felt like that could have been a better opportunity because you could have had like really good sort of data to show that how interesting the Anthony Kim story was and how much traction it was garnering against, say, like the Players or the Memorial or some of these other big headline events, because it's definitely caught more headlines this week than the Cognizant Classic or whatever the Honda's been rebranded to. But you kind of can only use that shot once, I think, and they've used it pretty early on in the year. But
I was pretty fascinated by the decision making to have him debut in Jeddah, right, of all places. I don't know if that was a request by him. I don't know if that was a thought of Liv to be like, let's put him in a pretty safe spot, right? I mean, you watch it, there's really no fans out there. There's not a lot of pressure. It's just him. Whereas, like, if you did it in Florida, for example, it would be kind of a different story. I think you would have more people turn out. But yeah, I am curious, like, to see what it looks like going forward now that they've made, the big splash has been made, right? And I think they almost could have been better off doing it at a more populated site or against a bigger PGA Tour event. I think it'll be interesting to see what it looks like when he plays again and whether there's actually an effect. Like, I'm curious to see that because I feel like every time we've talked about Liv or heard about Liv having a good week, like in Mexico, they had a great week, they had a good finish, while the PGA Tour couldn't finish Pebble. But then you look at the ratings and they can't even beat pickleball, and so it's a little bit of like a weird situation with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think just kind of lingering on Anthony Kim for a little bit longer. I don't know if you guys were following it much in the lead up to it, because it seemed like there wasn't like loads of coverage of him on the range. I think Claude Harmon put something up, and then there were a few swings popped up. Were really like just struck by his appearance much? Because I felt like when we first saw him come out, it was like, oh wow, like he's like changed quite a bit. Obviously,
he's aged like a long time, hasn't he?
But he has aged a lot, and also just the kind of the t-shirt and like high tops look compared to like the Nike days with the belts and like the crazy Nike shoes. I don't know. I just felt it quite jarring how different he looks. And that sounds silly because I'm like, yeah, well, he has aged 12 years, Bruce. Come on, like, don't give him a hard time. But
he's aged 30 years. I think that's the point, Bruce. Is he's very fresh faced, isn't he? When he's on tour 12 years ago. And look, I don't want to lower the tone of this podcast with too much speculation about what he's been up to for the last 12 years.
But I'm going to.
But it doesn't look like yoga and he's been on a vegan diet, does it? Let's be brutally honest. I mean, he really doesn't. And if he's had issues and stuff, like, you're sort of laughing because you can see me sort of trying to sidestep around it, but it doesn't look like he's been up to anything really constructive, does it? And maybe that's a little wide of the mark. I don't want to give the guy a low blow, but I did hear on the coverage that they made a few comments which I thought were really strange, like him saying he has an addictive personality and he's had some issues and he's sort of on the straight and narrow. And I thought, what an extremely bizarre comment to make for somebody unless you knew it, that people know nothing about for the last 12 years unless you know more. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Devoid of context, isn't it? Those sorts of remarks.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, you put stuff on social media, you get 50 people message about, all sorts of stuff. It looks like he's had a tough 12 years. I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
I think that's what also happens. That's the effect of choosing to come back, right? Because before, when he's away, that information, whatever that may look like, right? Whatever the reality of his situation might be, it's private. It's fully out of sight, out of mind. Nobody's really looking or actively searching for that, right? He comes back into the public sphere, comes back to play again. People start asking questions, and that's why now there's this lack of information. And that's why I said earlier, I think too, it'd be interesting to hear him tell his story, right? Because I think that would fill in a lot of the gaps, and I think would give more context to what he's doing now, why he's doing it, and what his goal is with it. Because otherwise, there's just so much room for speculation.
Yeah,
and you're right. I mean, he doesn't look great. He looks like he's aged a lot, And I'm also curious. Like, I'd be fascinated to know, like, what has it done to his swing? Like, what's his distance at? I think that's a hard part of him being on Liv is there's not like a ton of reliable stats with that, but I would love to know, what's he hitting his driver now versus then, what equipment is using, right? Like, and how did that even come about? So, I mean, there's just a ton of like interesting aspects to his return now that he's actually come back and played.
Yeah, they've kept a lot back, haven't they? They did well not to go crazy on it. Like they held back on it because I suppose that gives Liv scope to almost stretch it out over a longer story, because people are curious on all that sort of stuff. And I guess if they've got sort of some of the rights to all that sort of stuff, whether it's what he's playing and all of that side of things, then that would be really good.
Yeah, you've hit that on the head there, actually, Sam. I think saying that they're looking and saying, well, yeah, he probably won't have a great first tournament back, but if we can just make this a story that even if the golf doesn't stack up as we hope, he's got an interesting story to tell over several events, maybe a full season. That's what the smart strategy I think would be from Liv's standpoint, to keep getting people tuning into Liv to see how Kim's doing. Like, I think Full Swing's kind of shown that, like, storylines are just in the game is what golf's kind of crying out for. It seems to be, the kind of engaging content that is needed to access a bigger fan base. And I think Anthony Kim's like an example of that, and Liv probably just, trying it out really.
Full Swing's out on Wednesday, FYI. Do you get it on Wednesday as well, or have you already got it, Paolo?
No, I get it on Wednesday too. I think I could have asked to see it earlier, but I just didn't, and it's fine. I like watching it when everybody's watching it too, and I'm not going to be writing about it or anything, but I'm curious to see, what it looks like on the second season and what improvements they made. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Bruce, like I feel like there is this kind of void of stardom right now in the game. There's this void of actually interesting storylines, and he kind of fills in a lot of those gaps in some ways. If it goes well, right? If it goes poorly, and or even worse, if it's a lot of 74s and 76s, then it's like it's not even good or bad. It just is, which is kind of the worst thing to be in some ways. But yeah, it's so funny looking at the PGA Tour the way it is now, and then looking at Liv, and then kind of being like, golf is in such a weird place, right? And for this guy to come along now and try to do this again is such a weird timing for it. It's such a fascinating timing for it, and you'd almost want him to actually play well, because then it kind of fills in that, like you said, that void of somebody who is a little bit outside of the game, right? His impact, his influence has kind of spilled out onto outside of golf, which not very many of these guys, have that effect. I mean, I would say currently it's probably Rory is the only one besides Tiger who kind of has that effect, and even then it's not exactly like Tiger. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see where the game is at in terms of stardom right now.
Yeah, just on that point. Sorry, Sam, do you want to?
No, you go. I think you asked the same question.
And just on that point, Bala, just like zooming out a little bit, how do you see the game and kind of Liv and the PGA Tour? And there's obviously been a huge change even in the last few months or so in their respective positions. And, I mean, the rumor mill's a crazy thing, and I guess we don't want to give it more than it's kind of credit where credit's, but like even crazy stories about the idea that McIlroy is going to go to Liv, and there's going to be another sort of slew of player signings for Liv and people leaving the PGA Tour. What's your kind of sense of the kind of larger macro picture at this point?
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of in a no man's land right now, where we're not quite at the beginning where these two tours were at war with one another, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
But we're not quite at the other side of the tunnel, if you will, where they're back together, right, in some way. And I think it feels really like it kind of sucks from a product standpoint, right? Because you're watching two very diminished products, and you have players on one side who recognize that and maybe want that to be different, but then you also have players on both sides who don't want it to be different, who don't really care about the product. I mean, it's been kind of interesting listening to some players talk about the product, like calling it that, right? And I feel like before maybe they weren't so much, but you have guys like Colin Morikawa talking about how the TV product isn't good, and you have guys like Adam Scott. I mean, he talked at Pebble about how he feels like this deal, right, with the Strategic Sports Group and getting that, those billions of dollars. He feels like that should give the tour the ability to kind of almost start from scratch and really dream up something that creates a good product. So I think there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen right now, right? And there's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of, opinions about pro bringing the live guys back, opinions about not wanting them to come back. Who even knows if they want to come back? So there's just so much unknown and so much of this weird, like, dead period. Like I said, I think something's going to need to happen, whether it's a deal with the Public Investment Fund, or if it's, them just parting ways and not having a deal. I think there needs to be some kind of other inciting action for this to start turning toward a direction of everybody accepting, okay, this is what it's going to be, right? And I don't know, that all that is so convoluted, and it's so kind of tough to even predict, right? But I think it's just such a weird place that the game is in right now, and I think that's diminishing the overall product, but also individually the Live product and the PGA Tour product. So
there's so much critical mass in Live, though, isn't there? There's now so much. There's so much like high quality golf there that, like, I'm not going to say what Taylor Gooch said was right or whatever, but there's kind of a point there, and it was okay when it was a very small handful of big name players that they signed in the early days. But now you're in a world where it is actually just like irrelevant, like you say, the cognizant, whatever, like who's watching, that loses its shine immediately now this week, particularly when you look at the players that were playing in Jeddah. So, and hell, if Rory went and signed with them, then all bets are off. Like the whole thing unifies overnight, doesn't it? I dare say Pat Perez is not desperate to come and play on the PGA Tour again, but there's a handful of players who should be. You look at people like Neiman. He should totally be playing. Like, he should be up there with trying to carve out a career as one of the world's best. He shouldn't be sort of bunkered away. If things continued like they are now for the next 10 years, he would have a career of somewhat irrelevance, wouldn't he? Really, because he'd always been under a sort of a shielded tour, really, and it would kind of whatever he did on the golf course probably wouldn't have the recognition it deserves.
Yeah, I mean, I think what all of this did, right, is even further separate the majors from the rest of golf competition as a whole in terms of elevating them and highlighting them as the only thing people care. Because to your point, if Neiman continues to play for Live for the next 10 years, wins a bunch of Live events, never wins a major, it is kind of a forgotten career. But if he wins Augusta and maybe a US Open, it's a totally different conversation. And now more than ever, I feel like that's become the benchmark, right, for how to measure yourself as a golfer. And it's sad because there are some events on the PGA Tour that are great, and there are some, there are players on Live that are great, and you kind of just wish that the two were, still together in some form or fashion. And the forces that are preventing that, or that prevented that in the first place, it's kind of like they all need to just figure something out, right? Because like you can't ignore Liv anymore. You can't ignore the fact that they have, like we said, Rahm, Bryson, Brooks, all those guys, and Neiman. And we all thought if once they got Rahm, that would bring the tours together. So if for some reason Rory decided to go over there, I don't even know if that would actually bring everybody back together, because it's still so the break is so harsh, right? And so convoluted of like what it's actually going to look like in the future. Because I think that's the other thing too, is like, what is this product going to look like post a coming back together, right? Is it going to be kind of a world tour situation, or is it just going to be PGA Tour version 2.0, right? I mean, that's hopefully not the case, right? But it's so, there's so many questions still to be answered that it's so hard to see like where golf is in a year and 2 years and 5 years.
It feels like it's all just moving in one way, I guess, as well. There's there's still players moving over in dribs and drabs to Live, and the likes of Rahm are obviously huge signings, but it's hard to imagine a world at the moment, the current sort of status quo, where there's Live players who are welcomed back to the PGA Tour. Like, it feels like all the momentum is very much with Live, and I almost feel like I'm imagining that there was an announcement relatively recently that the PGA Tour and the Strategic Sports Group, who own Boston Red Sox and a few other franchises, have done a deal, but to all intents and purposes, it doesn't seem like it's changed things, and the pace of the pace at which things are moving on the PGA Tour side just isn't able to kind of keep up with what Liv's been doing.
Probably so complicated, it's the thing, right? Isn't it? There's probably so many sponsor arrangements and events, because every event is really its own unique web of corporate partners that you've somehow got to unwind. I don't know.
Yeah. Whereas Liv's a startup to all intents and purposes. It's a startup, and you see that in the quality of the broadcast and the commentators and all these little things that are teething problems, but it is actually quite agile as a result.
Liv is the cookie jar to the PGA Tour's ESPN, isn't it, Bruce?
That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
I think that's probably doing Liv a disservice, to be honest with you.
No, but it is really weird to think about, okay, so this money's coming in right from the Strategic Sports Group. What is that going to do for the players, for the schedule, the sponsors? Like, there's so much. That's why I'm saying, like, we're so early in this. Like, there's so much more that's going to come in terms of decision making and further investments. And like, that's why it's so weird to hear players talk about, give their opinions, be so strong about, oh, we don't want live guys to come back, or we do want live guys to come back. It's like, there's so many other steps that need to be figured out before it gets to that point, that it feels like that if they do come back together, it will be not next year, and who knows if the year after that will work. So it's just so much unknown in that sense.
Well, Paolo,
I guess with all of that uncertainty, it's quite an exciting time. And yeah, I think Paolo, we're very conscious of your time, and we do really appreciate you coming on the pod to just shine a light on Anthony Kim's kind of career and just speak a bit more authoritatively than Sam and I can, offer a bit more than yoga and vegan diets. It's been brilliant having you on and talking us through it all.
Is he a tough story to cover?
I mean, in some ways, right? Yes, because there's not a lot of information out there. I mean, credit to the people who did break the story, right? Of him coming back. Dylan DeShare at golf.com had the initial sort of like, oh, he's coming back to play. And then there was a big, even once that happened, there was a big gap of like, well, is he or isn't he, right? And so it is kind of a tough thing to there was a lot of wait and see, I guess I would put it that way. A lot of wait and see, because Live itself is kind of a tough, group, I guess, to cover in some ways as well, because they're just, like we said, they're a startup. They're running kind of on their own time, on their own schedule. And so the combination of Live and Anthony Kim makes for a very unique, I guess, scenario in terms of coverage, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, look, Paolo, it's been really good. And if we don't see you over in the UK this year, I'm hoping we can get back across the US, and who knows, I'll pass Mike Cross. And if not, I'm hoping we get to the West Coast in 2025. That's a big goal for us. Don't know if you're going to be on the broadcast or the broadcast, but on the coverage for ESPN at the Walker Cup. But that'd be a hell of an event. So.
Oh yeah, I'm for sure planning on that. Planning on being at that one. And yeah, it would be great to have you guys over here. I saw your trip. It looked like a lot of fun. I was very jealous of you guys seeing those courses. It was cool to hear. But no, I love the podcast. I love what you guys do. So appreciate you guys having me on.
That was good.
For our listeners who want to follow along a bit more, where can they find you? What your sort of socials and so on?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's just my first and last name, Paolo Uggetti. And then on Instagram, it's Paolo.Uggetti. And then, in ESPN.com, I guess, especially on major weeks, I'm doing a lot of stuff around the golf page. So it'll be fun to follow this season, see where it goes.
Fantastic.